They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but honestly, those people haven't had it lava hot and swarming with spiders. It's time for more outrageous chronicles of payback. From jaw-dropping uses of dog poop to entire gangs getting left in the dust, I've gathered the wildest revenge stories you'll ever hear. Ready? Let's dive in. The Raccoon Revenge. Back in 1998, a South Carolina high schooler, let us call him DM, had his heart shattered when his girlfriend ditched him for a guy named Chad. Chad wasn't just any guy. He owned a shiny Camaro that he treated like a trophy. Enraged and heartbroken, DM spent days brooding, plotting the ultimate payback. At night, DM set up a trap behind a Chinese takeout dumpster. After a week of waiting, the trap caught two gigantic raccoons. DM was grinning ear to ear. The next step was execution. Around 1 a.m., DM stealthily crept out of his apartment with the caged raccoons and a Slim Jim he borrowed from his auto shop job. Under the pale moonlight, he found Chad's Camaro parked quietly. With a practice flick, DM popped the lock, opened the door, and dumped the terrified raccoons inside. They hissed and scrambled on the floor mats as DM shut the door, sealing his vengeance in a metal vault. Morning came, and Chad raced out for a joyride only to be hit by absolute horror. The Camaro's interior looked like a crime scene, seats torn to shreds, fur and claws everywhere, and every surface coated in raccoon poop and pee. The stench was so horrible Chad nearly passed out. He frantically sprayed air freshener, scrubbed the upholstery, even left the windows open. Nothing worked. With repair bills soaring and the odor baked into the fabric, Chad had no choice but to scrap the car. He wound up riding the bus to work, while DM quietly high-fived himself at the camera. If only there had been one. Let's just say, revenge never smelled so foul. The paternity prank. Pranks can get downright vicious, as one Redditor named Tremendo discovered. He'd been tormented with prank calls from his friend Mike, a popular local bartender. Instead of begging off, Tremendo decided to settle the score with one blow, convince Mike he was about to become a father. Tremendo downloaded real-looking legal forms, custody papers, paternity statements, the whole library. He even crafted a heartfelt letter from a fictional Irish exchange student named Eliza, claiming Mike was the father of her baby. Tremendo sealed everything in an envelope and had it sent to Mike's home. Then came D-Day. Tremendo knew Mike would be working a Saturday night shift at a packed pub. He recruited another friend who Mike had never met to stroll in around 10 p.m. and hand Mike the envelope. Tremendo hid behind the bar, popcorn in hand, ready for the show. The friend walked in, handed the stack of documents to Mike, and left. Mike's hands immediately started shaking. He flipped through the papers, his face turning pale. He mumbled and spilled drinks as the buzzing pub watched him panic. Finally, Mike darted to the bar owner, eyes wide and frantic. The owner calmly pointed to the final page. Mike read the tiny print. "Go freak yourself, Mike." For a split second, Mike's eyes registered relief and he saw Tremendo doubled over in laughter. Mike's face twisted with fury and embarrassment. He stormed behind the bar and pounded Tremendo's chest with a fist as the whole pub burst into cheers. Just like that, the prank war was over. Moral of the story? Don't mess with a bartender and his sense of humor. If you don't want this kind of payoff, smash that like button and subscribe. And hey, if you've cooked up an epic revenge plan, you might see your tail on the next episode. The lunch thief's fiery farewell at a massive factory where Detroit worked. Lunch was sacred. For an entire week, someone had been sneaking into the break room and stealing his packed lunch. The plant was enormous, with dozens of temporary workers coming and going every week. Catching the culprit in the act was impossible, so Detroit got creative. That night, he prepared a plate of steak fajitas that smelled too good for any thief to resist. He added a normal amount of onions and peppers, and then he dumped in an absurd quantity of Carolina Reaper pepper. The salsa turned a boiling red. The next morning, Detroit placed the booby-trapped fajitas in the fridge and went to grab his usual sandwich. Just an hour later, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the plant. Workers rushed to the break room to find a man lying on the floor, gasping for air, clutching his chest. He had chowed down on Detroit's fajitas. Within minutes, his airway was closing and he was having an asthma attack so severe, co-workers were terrified. They scrambled to get his inhaler while someone called 911. Paramedics arrived and stabilized him. Luckily, he survived after a frightening trip to the hospital. Detroit just walked away as the man was taken away, lunchbox open and empty on the floor. Word spread fast. Never steal Detroit's lunch. From that day on, the plant's lunch thieves decided it was better to starve than to pay the fiery price. As Detroit later joked over a now-safe lunch, crime doesn't pay, but it sure makes your airways pay. The gold-digging stepmom's eviction. Some stepmom stories are fairy tales gone wrong, and Swede lived one. After his mother died, Swede's father married Grace, a woman seemingly only interested in dollar signs. Sure enough, when his father died soon after, Grace inherited a hefty fortune in cash and investments, while Swede inherited the family home. Grace moved in with her new boyfriend, Ivan, and acted like the house was hers. She started treating Swede's stuff as trash. She even gave away his prized PlayStation 4 to Ivan's cousin, saying Swede was too old to play games. Swede gritted his teeth, waiting for his moment. That moment came when Grace announced that she and Ivan were flying off to get married abroad and casually asked Swede to keep an eye on his house while they were away. Swede forced a tight smile and agreed. On the outside he said, sure, no problem. But inside, his revenge plan was cooking. No sooner had Grace and Ivan boarded the plane than Swede sprang into action. He called movers who packed up every single thing Grace and Ivan owned: their furniture, electronics, clothes, and dumped it in rental storage. Next, he had all the locks changed and a new security system installed. Then Swede put the house on the rental market. Within days, a young family moved in as tenants. The luxurious mansion Grace's supposed kingdom now had strangers paying rent. When Grace and Ivan finally returned from their honeymoon, they expected a grand welcome home. Instead, they got a grand surprise. The locks wouldn't open, and when they peered through the window, strangers were cooking pancakes in their kitchen. Grace's screams could be heard half a mile away. Eventually, a lawyer stepped in and coldly reminded her that the house was legally Swede's, by his father's will, not hers. Grace and Ivan were left with nothing. All the money and trust Grace had swallowed was gone, and she and Ivan wound up having to crash with relatives. Swede? He ended up with a sweet memory of seeing her face when the truth hit. The moral: don't kick the wolf while he is down. You might find yourself out in the cold. The anniversary slideshow shock. Usually, couples share a heartwarming photo slideshow at their anniversary, but not Josiah. His wife Mercy thought they were showing a sweet montage to 78 guests. Instead, Josiah had rigged it to explode Mercy's secret on the big screen. 6 weeks before their party, a friend had snapped photos of Mercy making out with a guy named Payman. Josiah learned of it and channeled his anger into planning. He quietly told a few trusted buddies, if you see Mercy with Payman, take pictures. His friends agreed. Over the next month, they stalked Mercy and Payman whenever possible, gathering a trove of humiliating images. Finally, party day arrived. Mercy was beaming as she dimmed the lights and clicked play on her romantic slideshow. The first slide was an innocent picture of Josiah. The next slide, Mercy passionately making out with Payman in a park. The slide after that showed them at a restaurant. And so on: Mercy with Payman kissing on a bridge, Mercy and Payman laughing in a hotel, Mercy and Payman all over the screen. The guests watched in stunned silence. Mercy, at first confused, realized with horror what was happening. She jumped up and ran to Josiah, begging him to stop. Please, this isn't fair. Turn it off. But Josiah stayed seated, expression blank. He waited until the last photo faded and the lights came on. Then, with eerie calm, he handed Mercy a pre-signed divorce form and said, sign here. The room was completely silent except for Mercy's sobs. For a few minutes, Josiah quietly read the room. Finally, he turned to Mercy and said, enjoy your slideshow. People began to murmur. Mercy was mortified. Everyone there had just witnessed her betrayal play out publicly. Josiah walked out that night separated, the crowd awed at how he handled her lies. Sometimes the best revenge is just giving someone exactly what they deserve. With the world watching. The Pooper Soaker 9000 forget squirt guns loaded with water. Jeff's mom went nuclear. When neighbor Scott decided it was hilarious to park his giant RV half on Jeff's lawn and insult anyone who complained, and his dog started pooping up Jeff's front yard, his mother's rage boiled over. One blistering summer afternoon, Mom grabbed every single turd from the yard courtesy of Scott's dog and dumped them into a bucket. She added some water and stirred until she had a vile brown broth. Then she filled a large squirt gun with the toxic mixture. That night, Scott parked the RV as usual. From the bushes, Jeff's mom unleashed hell. Splurge, splatter, sploosh. She sprayed rancid poop water all over that RV. By morning, the vehicle looked like abstract art painted with yesterday's chili. The sun had dried the mess into a crusty layer, and the air smelled like a gym locker in hell. The next day, Scott swaggered over to gloat about his RV fix. He opened the door and nearly blacked out. Brown streaks covered every surface. The smell was pure agony, and feces matted the tires. He stumbled back, too furious and embarrassed to say a word. Scott climbed in and peeled off, burning rubber. Jeff and his mom watched through the window as the once pristine RV crawled away. The neighborhood had a good laugh. Scott drove off with birdseed on the tires and a doggy-doo canvas that cost a fortune to clean. At least, they said, Scott finally learned not to shove his problems on other people's lawns. Debt destruction, the ex-fiancé scheme. This one's downright chilling. Walt was a contractor madly in love with his fiancée Anna, who had a degenerative disease and needed a wheelchair eventually. Walt threw himself into making her life easier. Over the years, he spent $32,680, yes, meticulously logged, renovating Anna's home, widened doorways, custom ramps, a level driveway, everything he could. He figured when it was time to sell, they'd use that equity for their dream accessible house together. Then fate kicked Walt in the gut. He was diagnosed with cancer. Anna instantly became the caretaker. Walt walked into chemo appointments with her, and they comforted each other on bad days. Walt thought their love could handle anything. He suggested putting in a house on the market so he could move in and they'd start their new life earlier than planned. Suddenly, Anna vanished. Phone calls went unanswered for days. One morning, Walt got a terse text. "Walt, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. I can't look after anyone in the long run." It was like a punch to the gut. Walt was devastated and furious, especially because he'd invested his business's money into her house, assuming they'd share the rewards. With a numb determination, Walt gathered his paperwork and went to Anna's place. There he found the proof of his nightmare, all of his invoices piled together, and hidden among them a photo of Anna cuddled up with a longtime friend on Walt's own couch. The betrayal was complete. Walt left town to focus on beating cancer. Months later, he was healthy again, but he still had those $32,680 worth of bills sitting on his desk. He got a lawyer and served Anna with a claim for the full amount. Anna was actually in the process of selling the house, so legally she had to pay Walt back for every cent he'd poured into it. Once she paid off Walt, she had almost nothing left for herself and wound up moving in with her daughter, broke and humbled. Then one day Walt literally ran into her. Anna was now in a wheelchair, looking frail. She tried the same plea on Walt. "Please forgive me. Give us another chance." Walt looked at her quietly and said simply, "No." Then he added with finality, "I don't see myself caring for anyone long-term anymore." Walt walked away, healthier and wealthier, while Anna got an object lesson in getting what she deserved. Love is supposed to be a two-way street, and Walt finally closed the gate. Karma in the factory town. My dad's old factory town has its own brand of justice. Almost everyone worked at the local auto plant and knew each other's business. When a worker named George was jumped by some local thugs and left maimed, everyone found out fast. George's father, a no-nonsense veteran named Walter, went on high alert. He and a few of George's buddies quietly spread the news of who was responsible. Guys named Flynn, Mac, and Zeno. By lunchtime the next day, the word was everywhere. Once the thugs clocked in at the plant, their co-workers gave them the cold shoulder of their lives. Tools started going missing from their lockers. Senior workers volunteered for their shifts just to avoid them. If you mentioned George's name, people shot dirty looks at Flynn, Mac, and Zeno. After a few months of this silent treatment, all three men just quit. Jobs gone. But it didn't stop there. In a town like that, getting a second chance was impossible. Employers in other towns would whisper, "One of those guys is applying," and no one would hire them. They drifted, quickly running out of money, and ended up homeless for the rest of their lives. Walter Seoster. And the community never let them forget. Every time one tried to get a job or rebuild, the rumor mill started again. No beer at the bar, no help at the local shop. Those outcasts felt it wherever they went. In my dad's words, "You hurt one of us, you hurt all of us." Those three thugs learned the hard way that in a small town, everyone has an eye out for justice. Boozy payback. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is delivered in a drink. Two teenage girls, Ellen and Lynn, were chilling at Lynn's place one night, mixing up cocktails. Lynn invited Ellen's ex-boyfriend Ben over. Ellen reluctantly agreed on one condition. She and Lynn would be the only ones sleeping in the bedroom. Absolutely no Ben sneaking in. Lynn swore it would be fine. A few minutes after Ben arrived, Lynn completely broke her promise. She kicked Ellen out of the bedroom and started making out with Ben right in front of her. Ellen seethed and stormed out of the room. She noticed Lynn was slurring her words and about to pass out drunk. That's when Ellen's revenge kicked in. Ellen grabbed a glass of water and handed it to Lynn, but instead of water, she filled it with straight vodka, the same vodka Lynn had been drinking. She held back a wicked grin and said, "Drink up." Lynn guzzled it without hesitation. Within seconds, Lynn's face turned green. She bolted to the bathroom and spent the next hour vomiting everything in sight. Ben panicked and tried to help, while Ellen sat on the couch listening to glup glup plop echo from the bathroom. Every new crash and splash made Ellen grin even wider. By sunrise, Lynn was a hungover wreck. She mumbled apologies, still clutching the toilet seat. Ellen just sipped orange juice with satisfaction. Sometimes you don't need pots and pans to make a statement, just a tall glass and a twist of karma. Insect-laden revenge. Not all revenge has to be poison. It can be a full-blown insect invasion. Olivia found this out the hard way. She discovered her boyfriend was cheating on her and had been abusing her cat. Instead of confronting him directly, Olivia decided to make life creepy, crawlily inconvenient. Before moving out, she bought a couple of potted plants and hid spider and fly eggs in the soil. Yes, she basically turned her ex's house into an incubator for nightmares. Weeks later, her phone buzzed with frantic texts. Liv, there are bugs everywhere in the house. Her ex was panicking, posting about spiders and FLIs in every room. He spent hundreds on exterminators and could no longer bring dates over without apologizing in advance. Olivia watched it all unfold from the comfort of her new place. Every ugh, it's in my hair, message cracked her up. The man who laughed at her cats was now losing sleep to real ones. Needless to say, Olivia lived bug-free ever after and her ex got what he deserved. The poopy hat. Curly Girlie's ex-husband had cheated on her with one of their mutual friends. After the split, they still had to share a car. One day, Curly noticed the cheating friend's trademark fedora sitting on the seat. An evil plan formed in Curly's mind. She casually grabbed a Q-tip from her purse, discreetly dipped it into a fresh pile of her dog's poop in the yard, then smeared that poop around the inside brim of the hat. Then she placed it back in the car, as if nothing had happened. A few days later, that friend hopped in the car and put on the hat. Immediately her eyes bugged out. She touched the inside of the hat, sniffed, and screamed, dropping it like it was on fire. The smell of rancid dog poop was overpowering. Curly popped into the car, feigning confusion, and drove off with a grin. The friend never wore that hat again, or talked to Curly much either. Justice, it seems, was a real gas. Booby-trapped mailbox. Finally, behold the ultimate old-school trap. Bugs told me about his grandfather, a retired Marine, who had one last mission: protect his mailbox. Young punks in the neighborhood had been vandalizing it for years, dragging it off with trucks, burning it, you name it. Grandpa had fixed it so many times he was sick of it. One day, he finished refortifying the mailbox post with thick steel plating hidden behind wood. Then he sat in the bushes in full ghillie suit. Of course, the kids showed up one night, hooked a chain from their pickup to the mailbox, and gunned it to drag it away. Crunch. The mailbox post held firm. The chain snapped, the truck's bumper tore off, and the pickup careened into a ditch. When the kids scrambled out, their truck was totaled. That was the last time anyone messed with Grandpa's mail. He strolled out next morning, polished the mailbox, and gave a salute: mission accomplished. Which story was wildest? So, which of these insane payback tales blew your mind the most? Tell me in the comments below. And if you found yourself wincing or laughing, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more twisted stories. You might just inspire the next one of these. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.